So welcome to number 788 podcast with me, your host, Des Latham. This is episode 5 of the series. 788 is the force number used by Max Lauker, former Swedish Arctic Ranger, Special Operations soldier, and intelligence professional. Max is his nom de plume, or nom de guerre, a pen name, and he has just published a remarkable book with help from the brilliant historical author, Tony Garcia. It's called Number 788, My Experiences in Swedish Special Operations, Preparing for NATO and the War on Terror. Just a quick note about Tony. He was an officer in the SA, the South African National Defence Force, and served in missions to the Sudan, the DRC, and along South Africa's long borders, and spent 16 years as a professional soldier. He's also published widely on military history and strategy, and has a PhD in military history from Stellenbosch University. So, a warm hello to you, Max.
Hi, Des. I'm happy to be back. It's always, I always have the best of times when we're talking.
Previous episodes, we heard about your training in special force operations in Sweden and your deployments across the globe and your fascinating life. And last episode, you were in the thick of it in the Balkans and operating in the Kosovo border with Serbia. What happened next?
What happened next? It doesn't end. This is basically the end of the beginning of my career and life in the armed forces. So I think after Kosovo, it has been the focus, of course, of this podcast, since it is the focus in the book as well. But after that, basically, where we stopped last week, that is our final move in the Balkans. We have probed into Serbian territory. We have discovered this breach of the militarized zone or border exclusion agreement, and then basically we hand that operation over to other resources, American and German resources, and they will, they are following up on that. And after that, we are going home. And when we get back home, nobody really knows about the future. This whole unit has been an experiment up to this point, but we have proved ourselves, and that was the whole purpose of going to the Balkans. Of course, the purpose was to serve a military purpose and a political purpose, but we also proved ourselves. So we get back to Sweden and the regiment. We also meet up with the small detachment of the unit that were deployed in Afghanistan as a military observation team. And at this point, we don't know are we in good standing? We can only assume that we are, but are we going to be funded? Is it going to continue? And it is, because we have proved ourselves enough, and all the doubters and when I talk about doubters, that's usually money people, money men in the headquarters and such that decides what kind of resources and abilities are necessary. But then we are immediately, basically, we come back and we have this, after a few days, we have this big meeting, and they're just, starting the PowerPoint, and we just see a picture of Afghanistan. So we know that this is going to be our next big mission. So yes, the unit continues as a unit from that point onwards still.
Looking at that deployment coming, I know you can't talk about it, but the point is that there must have been ifs and buts. Politically, at least in Sweden. How much did the Swedish politicians at the time know what you were up to, what your unit was doing? Were they fully aware, and what kind of interference did you experience from the politicians?
At that point, we didn't have a lot of awareness on the political level, because on the political level, we were still downsizing quite heavily, and there was no money to spend on these kind of things. But on the other hand, you want to be in the game, and at that point we were not in NATO yet, but we had a lot of cooperation with NATO. But to have cooperation with NATO, you still have to provide something. You have to put some skin in the game and deliver some intel, participate in operations, and so on. So I think it was a double-edged sword for them, because we had quite a lot of pushback politically. There was a lot of nervousness in the headquarters, and most of them, of course, they didn't know. They knew maybe, 2/3 into the Balkan mission, because then they had news of success. And then you're always going to be in good standing when you only deliver news of success and capability and action, and we can redeploy to Afghanistan, blah blah blah, with these and these capabilities. So of course, we were quite popular when we came back, and we were immediately almost redeployed to Afghanistan. But I can say that it was not an easy ride. And also there was a lot of skepticism in Sweden when we're talking specifically about Afghanistan, because there was only a quite small fraction of Swedish politicians that wanted to participate, because Afghanistan, even then they understood that this is going to be a different game, right? We have mostly been participating in peacekeeping missions up until that point. Some NATO-led, yes, but Afghanistan was never a peacekeeping mission. It was a peace enforcement mission, and with a bit of even a different touch than usual. So there was a lot of nervousness and a lot of doubt in general. But as a unit, we had proved ourselves enough, but not enough to secure survival forever, but for a while at least.
Well, luckily, I think that your leadership did go ahead because of things that have happened since. And speaking of things that have happened since, talk about your last years of involvement in Swedish military, day to day, and then why you left.
So I can just do a quick recap. Of course, this is going to be subject for different discussions and books, maybe, we don't know. But after this unit, because this was an experimental special purpose unit, and it was eventually, or it wasn't disbanded, but it was dissolved into different other elements that popped up, like the special forces and special operations groups and intelligence groups. And I kind of after I did a few deployments with this unit to Afghanistan, and one under their leadership into Iraq. Then I took a sidestep and moved into the intelligence track instead. And that's where I stayed for most of my career. Operative intelligence, 100%. I never been on the analytical side, mostly on the operative side. And then you are still working for the armed forces, but it's a different entity that you're serving under. So it's not an army unit anymore.
I understand. So let's jump to the book. I mean, you've got this vast experience in intel ops, special ops, all kinds of areas of military intelligence. And what drove you to write a book at all?
That's a good question. And I don't think that I had an initial drive for writing. I have a good imagination. Even if this book is not imagination, I build a lot of stories in my head. I mean, it's a part of the job when you start working a bit too long in intelligence, that you need to be able to visualize stories, personas, moments, situations, and play them up, because you might be able to have to act like that one day and keep it together. So I've always had a good imagination, always also for my own stories. And I will just stress again that they're not imaginary, but I've been keen to visualize them, because you learn from them. You try to take points. You have to be able to rewind and see what you did at some point. And that's comes with the job after a while. So I felt that I had this, I remember this part of my life very good. And I've been keen, or I've not been keen, but I wanted to do something with it, but I never jumped on it until this mutual friend of me and Tony, Jason, he said that, or he said for many years, you should write something. And so this, after 10 times and 10 years later, I said, okay, but I don't know how. And he just said, but I know someone that can help you. And he did.
Yeah, so, I mean, looking at that as a motivation, I mean, reading I haven't read your full book, but I've read some of the pre-edits, and I was amazed at your photographic memory skills. How did you manage to cobble all those moments together, especially in some of the training and also the operations where you're exhausted and having the capacity to recall all of those things? How did you manage to do that?
It was surprisingly easy, actually, because when we decided that we're going to write this book, and since I'm a bit black and white when it comes to my writing style, so either I do it all together full on in one go, or I don't, because I can't do this trickle writing. So I basically just sat down. I had a 3 months leave at the moment, and I was out of the country, Sweden. So I just sat down on the balcony during the summer, and I sat down and wrote for 3 months. And every chapter, I just keep sending them to Tony so he could start editing. And it was not a problem at all. To answer your question about the recall, it was very, very clear to me. And I think it's because I've used these memories to kind of track back and look at my own mistakes so many times. So I had a firm grip. And of course, for the book, some things has to be altered, but that is something we did in the later stage when you have to alter. So I just had the full story first, and then we started altering. You have to alter some names and some sequences of operations that you can't include, but you want to have the main parts of it. So it was surprisingly easy. I was a bit surprised myself how easy it came, but I think it's also a bit unfair because it's a part of my life that I enjoyed very much. I have fond memories from it, so it was not a hard time it was not rough to remember. It was pretty joyful, as like half of the book is about my experience getting into the army and then into the special operations field. So it was a breeze out of that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, highly successful. And I suppose success breeds confidence, and you have that capacity definitely above average to recall things. So all of those is kind of squeezed into this book, 788. Now, I mean, you say it's a number. Can you say where the number comes from?
Yes, the number comes from the selection to my first special purpose unit. That was the number that I had on my right thigh with 4 safety pins, and it is still dirty and dusty, but I kept it as a memento because that is where the journey started for me. So I think that was the significant step in, because otherwise I would have gone down the traditional path.
I know. And I mean, the fact is that Max Lauker is not your real name. So, and the 788 can't track you to anything because it's not specific enough. And there's no log anywhere really of that, so it's safer for you to use it. So I understand that. But why did you pick the nom de guerre, the nom de plume Max Lauker?
It has some. I can't reveal all the connections, but it has connections to the regiment, or the area around the geographical area around the regiment, where I started my career, the Arctic Ranger Regiment in Arvidsjaur in northern Sweden. So it's that is where it came from. So it's not very super specific, but it is. I liked it.
Yes, I agree. I mean, I was looking around to see if I could figure out where it's from, and I picked up Germany a lot. So I guess it's part of the discussion for a time when I see you face to face, perhaps at some point.
Yes, definitely. And I mean, there's a lot of people are going to figure it out, especially if you're from the area, because it's they will understand where it came from.
But at least you protected all of those involved, which I honor that, and I know that they will, even the individuals who are probably a little negative about anything being written about these things. It's so important that you and Tony kind of got together because of world history and what has happened to us with Sweden joining NATO. Me reading this book made me understand how prepared actually Sweden has been over the years, not just recently. Did you have that in mind as you began to publish? There were clear signs of with Russia invading Ukraine that the region itself was going to be impacted, particularly the Baltic states, and therefore abutting against Sweden, the likelihood of you and your country being involved in something. Was that part of the thinking of 788?
I think, or it wasn't a part of the original plan, but it was quite clear in late 2021 that something was going to happen. And then when I started writing, actually after the war started, so it was, one could more or less see in which direction it was going, and our NATO involvement. I didn't maybe expect that we would swing that fast, because we always had a firm, most political parties have had a firm non-NATO stance, but it was clear very quickly which direction we were going. So I think it's, I mean, you have to see it in the context, but so the timing is, I think the timing was also, it became right for a book like this, because of course when a new member joins NATO that has been fairly silent about their armed forces and there is not much material out there, except for a bit of our work with submarines and the United States and all of that. I think it's a good timing because people want and need to know more, and we have also seen that most of the interest has been from overseas, especially from the United States.
Yeah, I think the period in the 30s running up to the Second World War has some ramifications, particularly with the Sweden adopting or attempting to adopt a independent position, even as Finland at the same time was attempting the same and ran slap bang into the Russians. So, I mean, geopolitically, your book is really crucial, I think, for people who want to understand the preparation that's gone into this. So I do hope that some of the members of the Russian armed forces are taking note and looking at it, because they are not going to face a group of untried and untested soldiers, are they?
No, they're not. I mean, we are small in size, but we are quite sharp and effective. And of course, we have been following the trends like everyone else with demechanization of our armed forces and being more specialized. And now we're going a bit in the other direction. But I think the mindset and the mentality has always been there. But a lot of when you're talking to people that live in countries or serve in countries with large armies, it becomes insignificant. But still, our sword is very sharp at the moment, and it has always been. But it has been also adapted to the time, because when you are a small country, you can only spend so much on your armed forces. But we are definitely prepared, and we have always been to meet the needs that we have to meet.
Yes, and going back to the book, some structural questions, and then we'll end for this week and the episode series. So, looking at the font and the decision about layout and so on, you did talk a little last episode, about some of the production, but tell me about how that took place, the nuts and bolts about how you put it all together.
Basically, when I had, managed to do 170,000 words or something much more than we agreed on, because I think our first agreement was 70,000 words, but I just kept writing. Then, of course, it was a long period of time and this is where Tony's work was absolutely critical, because then we have to, it has to become a story. We have to get flow. You have to edit and come with suggestions, and that takes a lot of time. But eventually, a lot of hard work from both of us. We finished that, and then it went into the editor. And from that point onwards, it was fairly quick. They had a great design from Battlefield Designs, I think it is, a British guy who makes these epic book covers, and also they typeset it, and they sent it back and forth with a bit of different suggestions with fonts and the spacing and all of that. But it felt like it was fairly easy, because when you're dealing with professionals, they will serve you with really good options. There's not going to be any bad ones. So I was really happy with what they provided. We made a few choices ourselves, and then I think we were off. And I think me and Tony, we were so still involved in the writing process. We were taking in advanced praise and sharpening the foreword and all of that. So we accepted most that came, but it was really good. The suggestions we got on typesetting and design.
It's amazing you did 175,000 words, because that's quite a few books there. So I guess you've got book 2 coming out. You're working on that, I'm pretty certain. And the other productions you've been involved with, tell me a little about those.
Yeah, so I mean, we have spent a lot of time together, me and Tony, and when we over time it developed that we should do, because we both like to write. He writes good and a lot. I started liking writing after this, so we started quite early on with publishing this article series that's called War Diaries, that we wrote about, historic and current events, and we published that at History Avenue. But then quite recently we decided that we're going to expand a bit ourselves and start our own, our own platform, so we can decide what goes and not. And since then it's been great. We're publishing our own stuff. We have guest writers on underground strategy. We have a podcast, or we're trying to do a podcast. We're rookies and noobs, but we are getting into it. With some interesting guests, and also writing. I mean, I know Tony is at the moment writing on his. I'm I don't think I can mention that project yet, but he's writing on a very, very interesting book, and I'm writing on the sequel. And then we're also helping others. So we're taking in even some material to help edit and get it published. So it's an exciting journey. We're just starting out, but it's fun. Writing is fun. This sector is fun, and I feel that I have enough knowledge and network to provide something unique, and so does Tony. And together, it's a quite good combination, and we work well together.
Give me the name of that underground
strategy.
Right. I hope everyone listening is taking it down and heads off to undergroundstrategy.com, because it is a zone of fascinating information. And I think you undersell yourself, by the way, Max. I think you are extraordinarily gifted at writing, and I wish you all the best with the upcoming plans that you've got, not just for the podcasts, but I'd look forward to reading more of your material in whatever format you provide us with it, whether online or actually hard copies. And I wish you well too in dealing with the things that we are facing in the contemporary world in 2024, going to 2025. There are things that are going to test us here. And I'm sure that your concepts and your ideas in terms of underground strategy is going to resonate far more broadly than just with military bumps and people who are interested in military matters. So this has been a fascinating 5-part series. 788, number 788 is the book, My Experiences in Swedish Special Operations Preparing for NATO and the War on Terror, with Max Lauker, his nom de guerre. And it's just leaves me to say, Max, thank you so much for approaching me, you and Tony, and asked me to get involved and to work with you on this. And it's been a truly fascinating experience. Thank you so much for asking me.
Thank you, Des. It's been my pleasure and our pleasure. It's been we had a really great time doing this limited series, and I hope that our paths will cross again sooner than later, because it's been a good experience and you taught me a lot. So I've been happy.
Well, I'm honored to hear that. Thanks, Max.